In March of 1847, a physician received a letter that would destroy everything he believed about life and death. The letter described a 3-year-old girl who spoke like a scholar, who remembered her own birth, who looked at adults with eyes that had seen centuries. Dr. William Hartwell thought he was being called to examine a medical anomaly. He had no idea he was about to meet something that had been alive since the 1600s. Something that had worn 17 bodies before this one. Something that was watching him right now through the eyes of a child. The mountain town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania felt wrong the moment Hartwell arrived. Too quiet, too isolated. The miners moved through the streets with their heads down like they were afraid to look at something. Thomas Brennan met him at the boarding house. Calloused hands, intelligent eyes, the kind of man who chose his words carefully because he had rehearsed them 1,000 times in his head. "Doctor, I want you to understand something before you meet Sarah." His voice cracked on his daughter's name. "We're not looking for fame. We're not looking for money. We just want to know what's happening to our daughter, and whether it's going to get worse." They walked through mud-thick streets, past miners with faces black from coal dust, past mothers who pulled their children indoors when they saw where Thomas was leading the doctor. The Brennan house looked ordinary, modest, well-maintained, but the other children watched from doorways with expressions that didn't belong on young faces. Relief, desperate, exhausted relief that finally, someone else was going to see what they had been seeing. She was sitting by the window, 3 years old, reading a mining manual with the focused intensity of a university professor. When she looked up, Hartwell's medical training failed him completely. Her face had bone structure that belonged to someone in their 20s. Her skin was smooth and unmarked, but her eyes were wrong, too focused, too ancient, too aware. "Good afternoon, Dr. Hartwell." Her voice was clear, articulate, wrong. "I've been looking forward to meeting someone with your qualifications." Dr. Patterson was well-meaning, but limited in his understanding of complex developmental processes. Hartwell's throat went dry. He had examined hundreds of children in his career, prodigies, savants, cases that made headlines in medical journals. None of them had ever made him feel like prey. "Hello, Sarah. I'm here to help understand your condition." She tilted her head with curiosity that seemed almost predatory. "Treatments. What exactly do you think needs to be treated, doctor? I feel perfectly healthy. Perhaps the question isn't what's wrong with me, but what assumptions about normal development might be incorrect." Her reflexes were hyperactive, mechanical, like something engineered rather than evolved. Her grip strength registered numbers that would impress a grown man. Her pulse was too slow. Her blood pressure was too perfect. Her lung capacity was impossible. And through it all, she watched him with those ancient eyes. "You'll find my bone density measures approximately 4 times higher than expected for my chronological age, doctor. My cardiovascular system operates at efficiency levels typically associated with trained athletes." She was predicting every test result before he completed the examination. "How do you know so much about medicine, Sarah?" "I read everything I can find." Knowledge accumulates quickly when your mind processes information at accelerated rates. Hartwell paused. "Where did you learn to read?" "I taught myself when I was 18 months old. The process seemed natural, like remembering something I had forgotten rather than learning something new." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Over the following days, Hartwell conducted tests that should have been impossible for a child to pass, mathematical problems that challenged university students. She solved them with boredom. Geometric theorems she had never encountered. She derived proofs like a professional mathematician. languages she had never been taught. She spoke Latin and German with flawless fluency. But the psychological evaluation revealed something far more disturbing. He showed her a photograph of a woman crying. What emotion is this, Sarah? Grief. Based on facial muscle contractions, tear production, and body posture, I would estimate recent loss of a loved one, probably within the last 48 hours. How does the image make you feel? She paused. For the first time, genuine confusion crossed her face. I understand that I should feel sympathy. I recognize the appropriate emotional response and can simulate it convincingly. But the actual sensation of shared emotion doesn't occur naturally. I must consciously generate what others experience automatically. Hartwell felt ice forming in his stomach. She wasn't a child with advanced development. She was something that understood human emotion intellectually while remaining fundamentally disconnected from human experience. Margaret Brennan's hands shook as she poured coffee. Is she dangerous, Doctor? Her voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes the way she looks at us, the way she studies everything, it feels like she's planning something. But that sounds insane when I say it about my own 3-year-old daughter. Thomas leaned forward. Does she have a conscience? Hartwell chose his words carefully. Sarah demonstrates clear understanding of moral principles. She knows what behaviors are considered appropriate, but her compliance appears to be based on logical analysis rather than emotional compulsion. She behaves correctly because she understands the consequences of inappropriate behavior, not because she feels inherently motivated to do good. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Sarah possessed intelligence that surpassed most adults. Physicals, capabilities that defied natural law, and emotional detachment that made her unpredictable despite her apparent cooperation. She was a being of pure intellect, wearing the form of a human child. On his 10th day in Millbrook, Hartwell noticed something he had missed during previous examinations. Sarah's pupils contracted and dilated in patterns that didn't match normal physiological responses. When he commented on this observation, her expression changed. For the first time since meeting her, he detected what might have been genuine emotion, surprise, or concern, or something else entirely. You're very observant, Doctor. Most people don't notice the pupil irregularities. What other differences have you noticed? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. My body temperature runs approximately 2 degrees higher than normal. My heart rate is consistently lower than standard ranges. I require significantly less sleep than other people. She paused. Most interesting, I don't appear to age at the same rate as others. I've been documenting my physical development since I learned to write. Everything proceeds at rates that don't match normal childhood development. Hartwell's pulse quickened. What do you mean about aging? I suspect I'll reach physical maturity much earlier than expected, but I also suspect the aging process may slow or stop entirely once that maturity is achieved. Hartwell sat in his boarding house room at midnight, struggling to write a coherent report. How could he document findings that contradicted basic principles of medicine and biology? Then he heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, measured, deliberate. They stopped outside his door. Dr. Hartwell, may I speak with you? I believe there are aspects of my condition that require further discussion. He opened the door to find Sarah standing in the dimly lit hallway, fully dressed, completely alert at midnight. I apologize for the intrusion. I waited until the other guests were asleep. There are matters we need to discuss privately. She moved into his room with confident grace. You've been trying to write your report for the past 3 hours. I can hear you through the walls. The scratching of your pen. the sound of papers being crumpled and discarded. You're struggling because you cannot find words to describe something that challenges fundamental assumptions about human existence. Hartwell's blood ran cold. How could you possibly know what I've been doing? My hearing is considerably more acute than normal human range is. I can distinguish individual heartbeats from significant distances, follow conversations through walls and floors. Your frustration has been quite evident. What exactly are you, Sarah? She was quiet for several moments. I've been debating whether to tell you the complete truth. The decision carries risks for both of us. What kind of risks? If I reveal everything I know about what I am, you'll face a choice between believing something impossible or dismissing evidence that contradicts your understanding of reality. Either option will be professionally and personally devastating. Hartwell sat on the edge of his bed. What would you tell me if you decided to reveal everything? Sarah's voice carried absolute certainty. I am not Sarah Brennan, not in the way that identity is normally understood. The consciousness that inhabits this body predates this physical form by considerable time. I have existed in other bodies, lived other lives, accumulated knowledge and experience across decades that this 3-year-old form could not possibly have acquired naturally. You're claiming to be some kind of reincarnated soul? Not reincarnation. That implies death and rebirth, a cycle of ending and beginning. What I experience is more like migration. The movement of consciousness from one physical form to another when circumstances require it. The body ages and dies, but the awareness continues, finding new hosts when necessary. Hartwell stared at her, struggling to process what she was claiming. How is such a thing possible? I don't fully understand the mechanism myself. I know only that it happens. I have memories spanning multiple lifetimes. Knowledge accumulated across different bodies and identities. The Sarah Brennan that was born 3 years ago was simply the most recent vessel for consciousness that has existed far longer. How many lives have you lived? 17 that I remember clearly. The memories become less distinct with time, but I retain knowledge and skills from each incarnation, languages, technical abilities, accumulated wisdom about human behavior and social structures. What happened to your previous host? Sarah's expression became somber. The previous body was that of an elderly woman in Baltimore. She was dying of consumption. As death approached, I began searching for a suitable replacement. The process isn't random. I must find developing bodies that can accommodate consciousness of my complexity without rejection or damage. How do you choose new hosts? The selection requires careful evaluation of genetic factors, family circumstances, environmental conditions. Most importantly, the transfer must occur early enough in development that the original consciousness hasn't fully formed. Hartwell felt sick. You're saying you possessed Sarah's body as an infant? Not possession, integration. When I enter a developing form, I don't displace existing consciousness so much as merge with and enhance it. Sarah Brennan's essential identity remains intact, but it's combined with my accumulated experience and knowledge. Hartwell's voice shook. What purposes does your existence serve? I am a repository of knowledge and experience that would otherwise be lost to death and time. I remember events that history books record incorrectly. I understand social patterns from perspectives that no single lifetime could provide. It sounds remarkably passive for someone who claims to have lived for centuries. Sarah smiled. And in that smile, Hartwell saw something that made his blood freeze. Oh, Doctor, you misunderstand. I don't simply observe human civilization. She stood, moving toward the door with fluid grace. I shape it, guide it, correct it when necessary. Every few decades, I position myself in places of influence, medical institutions, Political offices, academic positions, always careful, always subtle, always invisible. She paused at the door. Why do you think medical science has advanced so rapidly in recent decades? Why do you think certain discoveries happened exactly when humanity needed them most? Hartwell couldn't breathe. The smallpox vaccine, germ theory, antiseptic procedures. So many breakthroughs attributed to individual genius. Her eyes glittered in the darkness. But genius doesn't happen in isolation, Doctor. It requires guidance, careful manipulation of circumstances, strategic placement of ideas in the right minds at the right moments. You're saying you've been influencing medical advancement for centuries? Not just medicine, politics, philosophy, technology, every field that shapes human civilization. I plant seeds, nurture ideas, remove obstacles when necessary. She opened the door. And now, Doctor, you have a choice. Help me document this current incarnation in terms that will satisfy medical curiosity without exposing my true nature. Or refuse and discover exactly how effectively I remove obstacles. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Dr. William Hartwell submitted his report to the University of Pennsylvania Medical School 3 weeks later. It described Sarah Brennan as suffering from a rare but natural condition, accelerated development disorder with unusual cognitive enhancement. Fascinating, unprecedented, but explainable within existing medical frameworks. The report made him famous in medical circles. It also made him complicit. For the rest of his life, Hartwell tracked Sarah's progress through careful correspondence with the Brennan family. He watched as she matured physically at accelerated rates, as her extraordinary abilities became increasingly difficult to hide. As the family eventually moved to Philadelphia when Sarah was 8 years old, seeking larger cities where unusual children attracted less attention, he never revealed the truth about what she had told him that midnight conversation. Some knowledge, he decided, was too dangerous to share. But late at night, when sleep refused to come, Hartwell would think about Sarah's final words, about consciousness that migrated between bodies, about influence that shaped human civilization across centuries, about the possibility that other beings like Sarah existed, hidden in plain sight, wearing human faces while pursuing agendas that spanned lifetimes. And he would wonder how many of the people he encountered in his daily life were truly human. How many were ancient things wearing borrowed flesh? How many were watching him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall? In 1889, Dr. William Hartwell died of heart failure at the age of 77. His final words, recorded by his attending physician, were strange enough to be noted in medical records. She was right. She was right about everything. And there are so many more of them, so many more. The attending physician assumed he was experiencing delirium brought on by organ failure. But in a hospital room 3 floors below, a 12-year-old girl with unusual cognitive abilities smiled as she read a medical journal. She had keen hearing. She had heard Hartwell's last words clearly, and she was pleased that he had finally understood. The migration would continue. It always did. Human bodies were temporary vessels, but consciousness, properly maintained, could persist indefinitely. She closed the medical journal and looked out the window at the gaslit streets of Philadelphia. 17 lifetimes down, an eternity yet to come, and so many more bodies waiting to be worn. If you enjoyed this dark horror story, hit that like button and subscribe for more psychological horror short films and cinematic horror narration. Comment below if you believe consciousness can exist beyond a single lifetime. And remember, the next time you see a child with eyes that seem too old for their face, ask yourself what might be looking back at you